The French Republic continues to fight. By early 1796, Prussia exited the anti-French coalition. Also, the war with Spain was over. Ceasefire treaties were signed with these countries. These days, the Austrian army was the biggest threat to the French Republic. The Austrians concentrated 170,000 soldiers at the Rhine. These forces were divided into two armies. The first one of 80,000 soldiers was led by the Field Marshal Wurmser. The second army of 90,000 soldiers was led by the promising Archduke Karl. The French Republic was able to move 150,000 soldiers to the Rhine against those two armies. These soldiers were led by the best at the time French generals Jourdan and Moreau. This front was defined as the main one, and it was clear to everyone that the decisive outcome of this war would be shaped here. There was also a secondary front. The Austro-Sardinian army, consisting of 52,000 people that was led by the Austrian General Bollier, threatened France from the Italian side. In addition, there still was a threat of an invasion of a foe from the South Shore. A 60,000 people army was responsible for that sector, led by General Scherer. But because nearly all supplies were sent to the main front, this army was in a very distressed situation and was in need of nearly everything. The soldiers were standing at their positions for 4 years and showed the decay of morale and physical form. Additionally to all these, there was also the 20,000 people army of the Alps of General Kellerman, which made sure the protection of the mountain passages from the side of Piedmont and Italy. The same number army of the foe was opposing Kellerman. On these mountain frontiers, there was a position struggle and the parties did not undertake active actions. Hence, this theater of operations was not of anyone's interest, as everyone paid attention to the Rhine. And only one man in Paris kept on writing to the War Ministry the instructions and plans for a counterstrike on the Italian front. It was Bonaparte. He fiercely persuaded the superiors about the necessity to begin the offensive operation in Italy. By that time, Bonaparte has progressed even more on the career ladder and was now the division general and the head of the internal troops of the Republic. His promotion was due to the events of October 1795. The Vendémiaire uprising started in Paris these days, which was a real threat to the government. The Royalists wanted to crush the Directory and restore the monarchy in France. And, following the Directory order, Bonaparte decisively suppressed that uprising using cannons. After the event, Bonaparte became close to the Directory and had a close acquaintance with Extraordinary War Minister Carnot. But despite such an important position, all thoughts of Bonaparte were directed only at the counterstrike in Italy. However, his plans were of absolutely no interest to the Directory. They believed that the Italian front was horizonless and so no one was seriously thinking about the offensive operation in Italy. However, Carnot paid attention to the offer of Bonaparte. And soon, the offensive operation plans were brought to the army commanders. Bonaparte was persuading General Scherer to go on the offensive. But Scherer thought that an offensive operation was absolutely impossible. The army practically didn't have the artillery and the supply lines were nearly paralyzed. All the received offensive operation instructions were completely turned down by Scherer, and he even threatened to resign if his army would not receive the necessary supply and reinforcement. Have all these offensive operation plans be carried out by the one who made them? And the Directory heard these words. In early March 1796, with the assistance of Carnot, Bonaparte was assigned the head of the Italian army. In 26, it was the first time for him to be the head of the entire army and perform the heaviest assault operation. On March 9, Bonaparte married charming Josephine. Just 2 days later, on March 11, he headed to his army. Such an unexpected assignment of Bonaparte did not cause any enthusiasm in the soldiers. Nobody could believe that a 26-year young general with the reputation of a mysterious mathematician would break a practically hopeless situation in Italy. The Army Headquarters. March 13, 1796. The letter from Colonel Vignal to General Massena. General Scherer is eagerly waiting for his fate. Two newspapers inform about his replacement and tell that Bonaparte departed from Paris with a large number of staff officers to take command of our army. I think that if this news is true, then the government makes a large mistake. I do believe that he has war talents, but they are clearly not enough, the same as his experience, to take command of the entire army as its commander-in-chief. Bonaparte arrived at the army headquarters in Nice on the evening of March 26 and took command the next day. The new commander-in-chief made an ambiguous impression on the soldiers. His leanness and Corsican accent caused ridicule in some soldiers. But Bonaparte started active work right on the first day and started to earn the respect of his subordinates with his actions. These days, the army had an extreme lack of equipment and food. Scoundrels in the war administration were actively stealing the supplies from the army provisions. The army did not receive many things it needed, and the exhausted hills of Piedmont were not able to feed the soldiers, who were not receiving their salaries for many months. The entire battalions did not have footwear, and all transport means of the army were boiled down to 200 mules. They had to exit this devastated region as soon as possible before the army completely decayed. Immediately after Bonaparte arrived, they started the investigations against all the people who were involved in the theft. The arrests of the war administration officials started right after. In these actions, Bonaparte was largely helped by his old friend Salicetti, and so very few scoundrels were able to avoid the responsibility. It is important that no scoundrel avoids the punishment. For a too long time, the soldiers and the interests of the society were sacrificed to the lovers of profit. We need an example, especially before we head to March. Some scarce money that the Directory gave to Bonaparte was used for the needs of the soldiers. In addition, he pretty promptly contracted the rich merchants of Piedmont and Genoa, and some supplies were delivered to the army on credit. Any possibility was used to supply the army. The Bonaparte's headquarters, March 28, 1796. I took command of the army. The administrative position of the army is bad but not hopeless. I must threaten the suppliers who stole a lot from the supply lines, and with these actions, I benefit greatly. From now on, the army will eat good bread and meat. The soldiers have already received large advance payments to cover their debts. There is still a lot of work to do to overcome great obstacles, but they all are surmountable. Citizens, all your intentions will be implemented. I will begin the march in the nearest time. Bonaparte switched from administrative tasks to war ones. There was a perfectly equipped 52,000 people Austro-Sardinian army led by General Bollier against his poor army. The Austrian general was 72 years old. He was an experienced and brave general, but his main disadvantages were a lack of initiative and energy. This army was separated into several parts. The 20,000 part of General Colli covered Turin. The rest of the soldiers were distributed along the Po River. The Austrian army had 140 cannons and great cavalry, which was considered exemplary in Europe these days. For the offensive operation against these troops, Bonaparte was able to involve only 38,000 soldiers from his army and only 60 cannons. The rest of his soldiers covered the shore and blocked the mountain passages. But despite all the hardships, Bonaparte had one advantage, and it was inarguable. This ragged, hungry, and weak by number army had great power. This army had an outstanding number of the commanders, whose names would be very soon known to the entire Europe. In addition to Bonaparte, there were Massena, Augereau, Lagarde, and Serrurier. All these generals were young and in their best shape. Also, Bonaparte assigned a man with extraordinary abilities in staff work to be the army chief of staff. It was Berthier, an officer of the extra class, who had an amazing ability to work. A year before, Berthier was the chief of staff of the Army of the Alps and knew this ground well. Also, the list of the officers included young Land, Murat, Junot, and Marmont. It only took a sparkle to ignite that fire. And Bonaparte, did not wait for too long.